showed me that 55 O's picked me up, and man, that thing is super cool.
Yeah, here's another one that's talking about with doing a top chop. If you want to come on over. This one here, 1955 O's. What I did is took 5 inches out of the roof in the front, and we actually took 4.5 inches out of the rear. So if you look at it, it's got just a little bit of a ray coming down on it. This one with the top chop, you know, like all the other ones again, with cutting it out, the top is actually narrower in the top and wider in the bottom. So what you'll end up seeing with this one is once we end up cutting the top, you'll see the splices of where we actually had to lengthen the roof back just a little bit. You'll see the cuts underneath the visor as far as through we end up adding a strip in here and added another strip to the back half of the roof that was a little bit narrower because of the fact that we had to actually call it quartering, where we had to quarter the roof out to make the length right and make the width right on it. And after doing the top chop of that, once we got all the filler pieces in, what I ended up doing is I have a donor 55 O's Ford hardtop that I actually cut the roof section out of it and actually ended up going around and dicing out the middle of the roof and set the other roof skin over the top of it, my scalping procedure that I like to call it, as far as through that way when the time comes for finishing off this roof, you've got a nice clean crown over the top that you don't have a bunch of body work and filler on, and just having to do a little bit of body work to the outside edges. If you kind of look at the trim on this one, you know, is shortened up, and we're able to go around and fit that piece down into the back on this one, and I just stretched that top piece out because it wasn't as wide. But if you come through to where the actual vent windows and stuff are, this side you can see there's a little bit of a weld seam right here where we actually butted this together, and this is the cut actually in the pot metal, and that's what makes it tougher on some of the 50s cars with chopping them, is instead of actually steel, you've got die cast. And there's a gentleman that I think is in New Jersey named Cecil Muggsy that actually sells a rod for fusing pot metal together, and that's what that actually is that's refused back together again. You can see the extra lengths that had to get added just because of the way the proportions changed on the vent window assemblies, and actually on the quarter windows it's kind of tucked up underneath here where the cuts actually are as far as making that seams run around. You know, underneath my visor, it's kind of tough to see, but up in the middle there's an extra section that was added in there to lengthen out that center piece, because the front half of the roof was considerably narrower than the back half of the roof with the design of the curvature of the body. So there was a considerably wider strip added in the middle of the roof on the front and a narrower one into the rear. But you know, it's one of those things where once you do it, and if you do it right, unfortunately everyone just thinks they come from the factory that way. And as you can see from pictures that I have, that it actually, all the bits and pieces that go together to make these things actually look like they came from the factory. You know, some of the first pictures is just starting with the car. It was actually, you know, like I said again, a clean Arizona car, kind of some cooked out paint, stripped the roof down to bare metal, and you can see where all the pictures show, you know, no windows. You got to gut the car as far as through. And the first steps was actually going around and cutting the top, splitting it down the middle and lengthening it out, and that's where you see the first little L cut as far as through. And then what we did is remove the first section of the roof, and in one picture you can see where there's the back half of the roof still on it. Cut the back post and took the complete roof off, as you can see, holding the 5-inch section that we took out of the front half in my hands. Started going around and laying the pieces together. We've got on the right side, you can see the driver's side section and the driver's back section put together, and then going around and putting the other 4 pieces with my parts car, the red 4-door 55, went around, stripped the paint off the roof of that, and cut the roof skin off. And once I had all the filler strips cut in the middle of the roof and the sides of the roof to actually make that structure as if it was a top chop, I cut the whole center of the roof skin out, and we took the roof skin off of the 4-door hardtop and actually went around and put her on top of the actual roof. So as you're seeing is the hole, and then the actual skin dropped over the top side of it. And then it was just hours and hours and hours of walking around and doing individual little tack welds as far as through the edge, because you never want to run a straight bead, otherwise you end up just warping up the steel. So it's a bunch of tacks making circles around till eventually you get the whole thing welded solid. And then after it's welded solid, run through, grind the welds, and then we went around and started doing some of the filler work. And as you can see from some of the pictures, there's actually the filler, and then actually getting that stuff all straightened out and put in a primer. Then after she was put in the primer, you can see the different stages where there's a little bit of the gray prime and a little bit of the tan prime as far as running through. It's all block sanding to go around and level and straighten the car out. Then there's a few pictures there of actually just in the painting process of masking it up, doing the painting, and you can see pictures of Jeff actually striping the car. The striping, as I said once before, again, is just kind of a combination effort between Jeff Williams and Brett Mason actually going around and doing the striping. Now, on this one, when you had a chance going right, I mean, it's not real pretty under the hood. It's definitely, I feel, as far as customs is, customers shouldn't have their hoods open at the shows anyway, so it's one of those things. But hiding underneath the hood of it, I pulled out the original 24, and actually got a 455 in it, and you know, ended up going around, and it's got a turbo 4, so it's a little bit later model drivetrain. So not real pretty, but boy, when I start the key, she goes and she runs well, and I'm all about just cruising her. You know, it used to run a little hot, so I ended up having a custom aluminum radiator made and had it kind of oversized. Originally, the radiator was on the back side of the core support, so I actually moved it to the front side, and that's where you see this kick out as far as through, and then put an extra trans cooler that's actually mounted off the front side. Just try to keep everything just a little bit cleaner on it. And nice part is with this radiator now, I mean, I can idle for hours and she never gets hot on the warmest days. So, but again, all about a cruiser. Custom should have their hood down anyway. But it does definitely still keep it motivated. It's a good tire smoker. You know, running through on this car, a few of the body modifications that happened is, again, nosed it, which means shaving the trim off the front side. There used to be the Oldsmobile globe in the front that was actually embossed out, and we smoothed all of that off. You know, had Jeff Williams and Brett Mason do the pinstriping on it. This is some of their handiwork, and there used to be the big old airplane that was on the front of it, and so this body line actually stopped back here because the airplane normally sat there, so we extended the body lines all the way forward on it. You know, went through on the car, did the usual shaving the door handles off. You know, those are actually run around through again. You can kind of see some of the seams from the top chop. I think it's kind of fun to have a little bit of that stuff exposed. You know, that way people get a chance to see it. If you look close with this window up here, you can see that extra, you know, 3.5-inch section, because again, with chopping and lengthening that stuff out, you know, this originally wasn't long enough, so I had to add pieces to be able to go around and cover for the top side of the glass. You know, going through the back half of the body, you know, again, kind of a little bit of a mild custom. These are actually Olds 98 taillights. This is a Super 88 model, so this would have been the smaller body, big motor for at the time. The 98s were kind of a little bit more the luxury cars, the ones that had more chrome trim, and these are 98 taillights, so these are actually about another inch or inch and a half longer than the 88s, and it has this extra chrome band on here, so it's actually the 98 taillights. It's kind of an unusual car at the fact that it is a reverse light delete car, which normally you'd see the reverse lights and they've got that special little plate. I also have it as a radio delete, which is kind of unusual, where there's a smooth plate on the dashboard. They actually, you know, got rid of the radio and just did the usual shaving the trim off the back. I was kind of always, you know, going back and forth because I really think Oldsmobile has very nice looking trim on it, but you know, custom can't have chrome trim. It's got to be nosed and decked, so we just kept the tasteful stuff and kind of cleaned her up the way the designers originally planned on going around and having the car. You know, if you want to see, like I was talking about in the interior, the way I did it up, it's another love it or hate it thing. You know, people either love it or they hate it. You know, I think it's kind of fun. It's you know, did the old leopard print. You can see the shifter as far over the dash. You know, kind of hiding in front of the shrunken head. You can see the smooth plate that's between her. That's normally where a radio would be, but with this car being a radio delete, you know, that was of course obviously gone and missing. What I end up doing on this car, because it's still like the tunes when we're cranking, is it actually has the secret audio on it. There's a little box that's kind of hiding around in the corner of the dashboard, and it does have a CD changer in it, so we can still go around and stack up a bunch of CDs and, you know, put on the tunes and do some cruising with her. The steering wheel that is also on it, that's a little bit of a change too. That's actually a 50-old steering wheel, which that's actually a much larger steering wheel than the 55s on it. It's one of those things where it kind of adds to the effect a little bit of driving it. You got to kind of get used to looking right through the middle of the steering wheel and below the visor when you're driving. It takes a little to get used to, but it's all fun part of the show, if anything. Hey Rick, come on over here. I don't know if you've seen this one that just came in. My buddy Pat's here's Nash. He can tell you a little bit about it.
All right, well this it's 46 Nash. We had chopped it, took 5 inches out of the front and 3 out of the rear. It's a 4-door, so it made it even more fun. Filled all the seams, put 55, Glenn?
Yeah, 55 volts headlights.
55 volts headlights in it.
And Nash always had kind of some funky looking headlights in the front, and it was real flat through there and kind of making everything flow. We ended up taking the 55s and putting them on it, and at least it makes everything kind of have that little bit of rake like the top chop on it. Ended up going around and putting a 49 Plymouth bumper on it, and obviously the Plymouths were a lot narrower than the Nashes, and with that kind of, you know, horizontal lines of the grill and the lower grill, we figured out the Plymouth bumper would be a good one with the ribs running around through, so we had to add about 9 or 10 inches in the middle of it that you see to get the width, you know, comparatively. We still have to build a roll pan between it and the grill surround, but it's all still a work in progress.
When you chop cars that have this style of window in them, they end up really small. And my thing was, when we chopped it, I don't care for that look, so we tried to make it, you know, fit the size of the car and the windows. And it took quite a bit of cutting and stretching to get it to fit in right. And with leaving, and my thing was leaving the bare metal and the welds, you know, people can see what actually goes into chopping it and making them bigger and seeing all the work that actually goes into it.
Makes the roof's kind of got a nice slight taper to it, and trying to keep that quarter window so proportionally still follows through with everything running around. And like you said, a lot of times they chop and they get really squatty back there, and it just ends up looking really weird. And with this one, like I said, with the rake chop, it was 5 out of the front and 3 in the rear, so they kind of had to go around and change proportions of everything to kind of squat her down a little bit on it. And on the very back half of the area at the trunk, once we chopped it, the whole roof went forward, and we ended up having to separate all the door posts and slide them backwards to go around and get them back to the openings again. And we took the actual trunk of the body, cut it through here, and actually cut it down. And what we did is actually laid the trunk lid down to kind of flow with the roof, and that's where you see this extra 2.5-inch filler strip through there. That was the difference of once we laid it down at the space between the original roof and the old roof as far as through. So it made a pretty clean chop, a little bit of re-engineering and kind of resetting the flow to it, but kind of makes her, instead of being kind of the stately Nash, kind of making her a little bit more sleek and definitely a lot more cool and custom. The rails are all below the rear tail pan on it. As you can see, it's a little bit of a work still in progress, but on the Nashes, actually, with part of lowering this car, it's actually way lower than what this thing was stock. It was really very tall. The frame rails that you see here actually used to be down below the rear tail pan, and what we ended up doing is at this stretch back here, we took an angular cutout of the frame rails and actually brought the tops of the rails all the way up in the back, which allowed the springs to actually come farther up into the floor and drop the whole rear end of the car down. And the front end's got cut coils, and we actually dropped the spring pockets down to go around and get the front end closer to the ground.
Because nobody made any kind of suspension kits for an Nash, so it's all homemade engineered drop kit.
It's got the fine seam about everyone that has a tendency to deal in Nashes is just a little bit of the unusual sorts of kind of, in general, mostly a lot of the older guys that are really tweaked about you don't mess up a Nash, you got to keep a Nash stock. So
we're definitely going to turn some heads and raise some eyebrows when this starts rolling around.
Hey Rick, have you seen this one yet? Yeah, Rick, this one's a 1962 Chrysler 300 Sport. They actually ended up going and having the lettered series cars or the sport cars, and this is actually the one that is the sport. So it's actually the 383 and dual quads, you know, versus, you know, having a bench seat in the back opposed to a bucket. But made it as an early 60s custom car is kind of what I like. It's shaved, you know, nose and deck. Got rid of the handles, got rid of some of the trim on it. I've got it lowered down, got our good old corn alcohol running in that baby. She's running dual quads with early speed equipment on it. It's you know, big chrome bass bolt flake in the roof, satin Viper red on her. It's pinstriped by, you know, my buddy Jeff Williams went around with Del Swanson with his artwork. As you can see, there's a little bit of stuff kind of floating all around on it. If you'd like, it can kind of show you under the hood. You may get a kick out of that. We've got her equipped with a little of the early speed equipment. We've got the Offenhauser manifold on it, the old Offie fin aluminum valve covers on her, running the Edelbrock dual quads, and running ceramic metallic coated exhaust manifolds on her. We did a switch over on her, at least if you're going to make her go, you want to make her stop. I've got drop spindles with disc brakes on it. Switched it over to the dual master cylinder on this one. So just a little, it definitely isn't the world's fastest car, but it's a good cruiser. You know, I always laugh and say sometimes a little more show than go, but it's still a fun ride. On the grill, you can see actually the grill of my 300 crest in the back. We've got the medallions that Arlo Dillman made from Wisconsin Hot Rod Radio. If any of you guys have seen him on before, it's with our Hoodlums Car Club. We always say the fact, if you see some of our T-shirts, we've got the skull with the steel plate. And Arlo says that's our skull before it got the steel plate. That's what caused it to go around and be there. And on the quarters of it, you'll see we've got our also Hoodlums skull back there. Some of the boys like to refer to it as the mutant baby skulls. They're a little funky. Interior on this car, it's one of those ones where Chrysler and good old designer Virgil Exner, I thought he did an awesome job. So it was one of those ones where I didn't change a lot around in this car. I just figured it's one of those things, why mess with perfection. So it's just the original red interior as far as running through, the split bench bucket design front. Like I said, the letter series cars had a console that ran all the way down with kind of buckets in the back seat, but this one's a bench. And this car originally came from Arizona that I picked up. It had typical, just kind of a really oxidized, cooked out interior. So I replaced the driver's seat bottom, but other than that, this is all the original interior that I just went back around, cleaned up, and re-vinyl-dyed. Even the carpeting in it is still 1962 original yet. So it was a pretty nice car that I actually started with before we went around and started doing the building on it. It still had a little unfortunate Chrysler's integrity, where even with an Arizona car, I had to put a few patches here and there on the car just from sand getting in the crevices and things. But she's like I said, you can see, taking a peek at the dashboard, it's actually the old, what they call the Astrodome dash on it, and it actually runs electroluminescent gauges, where it's actually what they call a power pack that kind of lights them up instead of the usual bulbs. It's kind of neat. At nighttime it actually kind of glows a little bit as far as running through. Kind of a fun early 60s dash design. And of course, the early Mopars, you've got your push button shift over on the left side of the dash there, and it doesn't actually have a park. The park is actually the parking brake that you see to the left on it. There's a little brake drum off the back of the transmission, and that's what actually locks his car into park. So if you don't end up doing that and you're parked on a hill, she's going to roll. So it's just one of those things, you always got to make sure that's on, and and occasionally the springs break on those things too.
I'm Tom Syme. Got a 48 Willys pickup, converted to a crew cab. Yes, it's kind of the neatest thing on it. It's the motor. It's got a 427 big block Chevy. Threw it in. At one time it was a 350 Chevy that came out of a Suburban. Back in the 60s it was a tow vehicle for a sprint car. We kind of took it all apart. It was a standard cab, and started from scratch and did everything over again. Okay, like I said, it's a 1970. It actually was a 402. We bored it 125 thousandths over, which makes it a standard bore 427. 11.5 to 1 compression, forged all internals, roller rockers, pretty much every goodie you could put in from the 60s. Obviously dual quads, puts out probably 475, 500 horse. Got a turbo 350 behind it. NP 205 1-ton transfer case behind that, because it's a 4-wheel drive. Has Ford 9-inch in the back, 35 splines, locker, pretty much all the goodies you could ever think of. It's quite fun to drive. It gets going, takes and spins the tires quite well. So, and a little bit later we'll probably do that for you. What we ended up doing here is, you can picture this being the back of the cab. This door jamb stayed. This is all stock through here. We took the back panel of the truck, moved it back, took the front jambs, which would be this part here, and took and turned it around, put it on obviously the opposite sides. It takes right front and left, so you get everything to work right. The door jamb from the back of another cab, and then fabricated all the pieces to go in between. Made everything stretch across. The doors, you can see the split right here and down in here. Actually, it's on this side. Actually is the back half of another door from the opposite side. And then you just do a little pie cut to straighten it out. And then the roof is from a 60 Jeep station wagon, and it's actually cut lengthwise. I think I took about 24 inches out of the middle of it, and then a few pie cuts. And if you go inside, you can actually see the weld seam where it was put back together. And then when we built it, we used stock rockers, and we actually built a seat riser so we can get some cheater storage for it. Be able to carry a few things without them rolling around in the cab. The paint job is all custom. Obviously, we have pinstriping on the fenders, real elaborate design. There's even a gold leaf cockroaches on each fender. This is a design my friend Jeff did all the painting from Jeff Williams Signs. He had it down on one of his drawing boards to Del Swanson original. We took and had him throw that one on each side. The Tommy Guns Butcher Shop, it's kind of the name of my shop, somewhat faux name. We just kind of do it for the fun of it. It's kind of interesting. I was a gunsmith for a number of years, so we just kind of threw it in and played with it for a little while. Everything on here was done, I think, about 3 years ago. Then we come back, we got rat fink, of course. Everybody needs a rat fink on something. Then you go around to the tailgate, and the tailgate has the 4 phases of a skull that Jeff decided. We had to wait a little while for this. This sat down in his shop for 3 years waiting to come back. I've been running around with a rusty tailgate for the last 3 years. Finally got him, goaded him into finally finishing it up so we can get the finishing touch on the truck. And then over here, because I like to burn tires off, he came up with this one, and it says Inner Fender Well Vulcanization, a Specialty. We're on probably our 15th or 16th set of tires. As you can see, we rubber coat the inside of the wheel wells quite well, and the back of the license plate. This set of tires has, I think, like about 150 miles on them. We bought them after a party here last year. Burned them from brand new right down about halfway. Then a party at my house, we decided we just get into it a little bit harder, and we ended up burning them right to what they are now. Sheesh, keep going. She's at 240, we can't.
Those are definitely slicks now, man. Look at that.
Tough to be cool.
Rick, you're looking a little buzzed. Maybe you ought to get off that stool and sit on something with a little back support.
Oh man, I'll tell you, I think I need to look at the stars, Rock.
Well, let's go this way.
All right, brother. Oh. Oh man. Wow, look at those stars. Hey man, those stars are moving all over the place. Oh, Bill, why did you make me do this by myself? Holy cow, it's morning already. Wow, man, where am I? What is this place all about?
Hey man, I got your car all done. We've got it in the shop over there.
Hey, Rocky, thank God I found him. I didn't know where I was.
Well, let's go take a look at the car, but I think before we go out there, I think you need to have another swig.
A little eye opener. Oh, man. Okay, I don't know how long I can hang out with you guys. Maybe I'll have to live here. Well, folks, I hope you liked my little story. Like I said, the names have been changed to protect the innocent. The places are a figment maybe of my imagination, maybe a figment of yours. But I'll tell you what, I'll never forget that day. Till tomorrow. Adios.
Tough to be cool.
Tough to be cool.